The issue isn't just, hey, you're leaving money on the table. Like, that's part of it. And it does
Right.
hurt you as a company. But think about your clients. They're
I was-
literally saying, I want to
Yes.
spend this
Yes.
money with you because
Yes.
I want to grow my business.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, no.
if
well
anything,
said.
honor that, right? Because like
Yes.
that's the client that's going to come back to you in 6 months when you're not, you're not asking them what they need, you're not there at the table when they're, when they're making their plans for growth. You're not engaged with them. What do you think's going to happen when an MSP shows up that starts to talk to them that way? There's a deficit happening in this relation.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the BMK Vision Podcast. You got Gary and Josh with you today. Gary, first of all, I know I drive you crazy. I'm supposed to have a great topic for you day before, get the show notes, all my brilliant thoughts. And every time it just gets shorter and shorter to this point that you don't even know what we're going to talk about today because my lack of planning really is going to serve us well today. We're going to talk about ICP. You know what that means? Of course you do. What does it mean?
What is that? That's the ideal client profile.
That's right. That's right. And there's another phrase out there called a TCP, the typical client profile. And I think what's really right, I think it's really funny is that, myself included, just there's the caveat for any episode. When I'm busting balls or talking about this stuff, just know I'm making all the same mistakes. So a lot of these lessons are learned from my own internal. But that TCP, we can get kind of tricked that when we finally really sit down to do that ICP, we just start describing our typical client profile. We didn't really kind of figure out why are they our ideal profile. And I'll tell you, Gary, one of the things that I've made the mistake with is when I'm thinking about my ICP, I think about it almost exclusively from the who would like to do business with us in any form. Not necessarily why they're ideal for me as well. Really just here's the type of people that I think would say yes and that could use our services. And that's kind of where the story has stopped in the past. You see the fault in my logic there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that when you're setting up your company, it's like if you start with, hey, I'll take money from anyone, where's the end game? What are you trying to go after? What's actually, how do you structure your business? Who do you hire? I mean, all these things are based on on that client, right?
Right. Right. Now, last, very recently, I was on a call with a really cool MSP, but they're developing. They're figuring it out. They have only been in the game a few years now. Really strong leadership team. They're doing all the right things. And in that call, we were going through this thing that I used to call it drag along rate, and then someone else taught me a better word, a pull through rate of how much project, hourly, product should we see as a percentage of total recurring revenue? Okay. You're obviously familiar with that. Let's just test. Is that a valid thing to even look at?
Yeah, I think so. Um, it's just being in business for as long as I have, you just naturally get more business out of existing customers. It comes through projects, it comes from out of scope items. So really the trick is how did you configure their agreement to allow for that?
That's right. That's right. And I know when before I even had a name drag along for it, I really kind of thought about the hourly. That was like my biggest thing I focused on because I really looked at it as that hourly is going to take the pressure off of your agreements and you're going to do just the things that are in scope and you're going to see a higher agreement gross profit. If I go way back in the early days of managed services, it was just countless times that I would watch a service manager and owner really get frustrated because what they would recognize is I need 100 hours of billable work just to be profitable and meet my service gross profit or my service salary service revenue ratio. And that seemed discouraging to them. Now, the first time I heard that was probably 2011. And if I would have really latched onto that, I would have been said, yeah, because managed services sucks, right? Because it's all smoke and mirrors, man. Hopefully that gets taken out of context and people try to flame me for that. But that idea that the total value of the client is what you can get on the recurring, that's not it. It's what are you gonna do with that relationship, and what type of client are you getting that 1,500, 25, $3,500 a month for? What are you gonna do with it? If you're just in that support, we support our clients, oh, hey, great, man, make a business model out of that. But ultimately, we wanna get that project, that thing that they're gonna buy next, that they're gonna buy not only when they grow, which I think is where we a lot of time focus, but what else do they wanna do? What can they imagine? What can you help facilitate for them?
Yeah. Yeah, I always try to frame it as, the managed services were the support of what exists in the company. And then what doesn't exist is a project or an out of scope hourly bill. And so if you structure your agreement to say that, what happens is, let's say they start with ten users in their environment, you bill 150 to $200 a user. When another user comes in, you get that 150 to 200, which is great, but you also get the couple hours or, 3, 4 hours of onboarding that customer. You get the hardware for that customer. Maybe they need a new, server cloud system. So that's out of scope. So as you onboard that system in, you get that project, which is extra, and then that folds into support. So it's this very organic way of growing your business while you're just supporting what their environment has today, but anything new is billable.
That's right. That's right. And I think, thinking of the call that I was recently on, they were making that transition from it's something passive to something that you can really impact. And that passive is, hey, the client asked us for this. We were in the right place, the right time with them, and they indicated that they needed something more. And that's the extent of it. I think that's where most of us find ourselves at some point. But once we flip the switch and say, hey, without even trying, we've got this 25% pull through on projects. And that's just what happened with no intention. And with this particular client, when we pressed on that and said, look, I'd really rather see that closer to 35%. And they did the math and whatever that was, it was a couple $100,000. And they're like, there's no way. Our clients will never do that. That they don't need it, which brought us full circle to ideal client profile. We've got the wrong clients to get us where we need to be. We had the right clients to get some cash coming in the door, but they're not the clients that are going to get us where we need to be. And to which they're not this adversarial with me at all. But the theme was, so are we supposed to say no to clients? Are we supposed to say no? We don't want that client, which is fair because that's as you're working through this, that's all you're really going to hear initially. Oh, so we should say no to that. It's like, well, you can say yes to it, but you're going to keep getting the results that you're getting now, right? Yeah. So kind of an eye-opening moment for them, and it really that moment solidified it for me on why that ICP is so important. And
Yeah, I think, and this is a difficult thing for some MSPs, especially when they're starting out and their business acumen may not be as expanded or as mature as it will be in the future. But when you think about a company, think about your own company. What's your goal? It's typically to grow, right? So we grow through various means, but ultimately we're growing revenue, as we grow the company. What's that growth rate that you're targeting? When you're starting out, that might be like 100% a year, year over year. A lot of companies grow at that rate. A lot of small businesses grow at that rate. But typically you're going to find like over time, a 20% growth rate is like a healthy rate, right? When you structure your agreements based on that, you can bake in the fact that the company is going to grow their employee count, they're going to grow their revenue, they're going to grow their systems around that same type of rate, which means they're going to have 20% or so more systems and people and those kind of things every year that kind of compounds, right? So it's just when you select these clients, now this is where it's like, well, am I supposed to say no? Well, if you are positioned against a prospect that doesn't wanna grow, that doesn't wanna build their business, that doesn't really want you to do anything substantial to make sure that those things are true, that might not be the right client. So you may be looking at your base of clients and saying, yeah, these guys, they just want to kind of maintain. They don't really want to do anything. They're actually downsizing. Yeah, those are not your ideal client in that profile matrix. But when you talk to them and you find out, hey, they do want to grow, they want to grow at a 20% growth rate or more, what they're telling you is they do need to spend the money. So it's like an economics thing versus just kind of a technology thing. And so much words out there of like, I want to be a strategy advisor and all that stuff. That's kind of where it starts, right? And so you want to have that relationship of like, hey, I'm here to help you grow. You want to grow. That's a good match. Now, the projection for you gets to be, well, if they're going to grow, I'm going to grow. So structure your agreements and your ability to bill out of scope and project work accordingly, and you will grow.
That's right. Yeah, there's two really big parts in there. Hopefully, I'm able to remember both. So let's talk on that kind of client profile for a minute. I got exposure to a company that was back then they were probably 75. Now I think they're closer to like 55, 65 million. And I got to be around them a few times a year for about 3 or 4 years. And during that time, I observed them go from our minimum is like $5,000 a month contract, which it's like, okay, that's cool. Most of my clients would kill for a $5,000 a month contract. Uh, I think the last time I talked to them about 2 years ago, they were closer to 15 million or 15,000 a month rather. If they're not gonna do 15,000, it's very easy for us to say we can't help you. And they were also the ones that really helped me kinda take that drag along rate, that pull through rate, and put a really fine tip on it for me. And so at that point, I wasn't connecting the 2. I wasn't connecting their minimum to their maturity and pull through rate. When I had that call with the client recently, it hit me like a ton of bricks. They weren't saying no because a $10,000 a month contract was just too much of a pain in the neck for them. Their maturity said they're not going to be the company that can grow to the level we require them to for us to also grow our team and get more and more people in to support what we want to do alongside what they want to do. Like that just it hit me like a ton of bricks. Now, I'll ask you, am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, I think you are, and it's that mutually beneficial engagement that you want to be in, right? So if you want to grow your company as an MSP, you need to partner with companies that also want to grow, right? So if
Yes.
all the companies that you're working with are like, nah, I'm kind of downsizing, and just in maintenance mode, you know what that's positioning your company to be, right? And so it puts a ton of um, pressure on the sales team to then go and expand your client base, you know?
Right.
So it's very important to understand like who you're engaging with, and when you talk to them, this is like, the real true benefit to this is like now you have this better conversation as you talk to your prospects. It's no longer like how many computers do you have and what cloud systems are we going to support or what application. Yeah, that's all important, operationally, but from a sales perspective and a relationship perspective, just ask them where they're trying to go in life, Like, what is their goal? And how you can facilitate that is really what they want from you. They don't care how many people you have on your team and, what kind of specialization that you have, like, that I mean, it's kind of important and it'll show up at some point. But if you show real care and honest care through what their ultimate business goals are, that's really where it's gonna pique their interest in understanding, "Oh, I'm partnering with a company that actually gets it." And the trick is, or like the secret of this is like, you've now created a relationship with a company that's going to make your company better.
Right. Right. Oh man. Still on that theme of why MSPs get stuck at $2 million. This is a huge part of it. Not only have you probably not mastered, the sales component to it, you built the company with the client that got you to where you are, which is awesome, but they're also going to be your growth inhibitors because, and here, I just a couple weeks ago, I was with a client, a little over $2 million in revenue. In fact, I'll ask you, and you may not, spend enough time on this to give a fair answer. $2 million MSP, what would you guess the number of managed services clients they have? And it's okay if you've never thought about it.
They might have, 10 to 15, consistent clients, but they could have 30. I don't I mean,
Sure. Yeah. The,
you know,
the answer is, and leave a comment below if your number is different than what my observation is, about 35 to 40, which means they've got lots of 2,000, 1,500, a few 4,000s. That's what typically happens. Okay. This client that I visited recently a couple weeks ago was 17 clients. Now, to me, that's such a radical number. To you, you kind of, went there anyway. That's an anomaly. And that's weird. Like, that's weird. And you want to talk about growth challenges. If you're getting that revenue from 17 clients, it sounds like it could be pretty good. But if many of those clients have been with you for 5, 10 years, they're not the companies that are going to grow you because they're not looking to grow. They're not trying to light the world on fire. Right. Which you might kind of think it should be. They're larger clients, larger companies. Now it really starts mattering in what vertical they're in. Right? A 6-person accounting firm that's been in business for 30 years and they only needed 15 licenses. Well, guess what? They're probably only ever going to need 15 licenses and they're probably, or, seats, and they're probably not going to be trying to light the world on fire with technology advances. So that to me really tells a story of if you got 17 clients, they better be the right 17 clients. And if they're not helping you generate your 20, 25% growth, they're not likely to just suddenly do it. So when you think
yeah,
about the next 17 clients, we got to get really fine tuned.
yeah, and I think, I th I think any of this could work, right? So, like, if you've chosen a vertical where, let's say it's a doctor's office kind of vertical where, they just come naturally to you. You have this specialization with their systems. You got some relationship that's just bringing you referrals. Yeah, those typically will be like that 5 to 10 user environments, and maybe 1,500 to $2,000 a month, um, and they won't grow past that. And that's okay. Your ideal client profile states that, and all it says is really, your pull through rate may be a little bit less with those types of clients. The issue really is kind of the growth, right? Like you shouldn't expect, other than your yearly kind of increase in rates, 5 to 7%. That's really going to be your growth engine for those existing client base. So you actually have to sell more clients, and that's okay. That's how you forecast.
That's exactly right. That just kind of hit me as you were speaking. It's, hey, if your pull through rate is 15%, you have to at least tell your story to yourself and know your story. These clients are always going to be worth this, $18,000 a year contract is only going to be worth 26,000 a year. That's cool. Just know that, plan for it, know that you're going to make your real growth through, like you said, new client acquisition, and that's it. It, but figure out what it is, determine if that's what you want or not, if that's going to work for you, and what your plan is to get your 20% growth through just pure net new sales. You get to hire in that format, you get to staff in that manner, you get the right talent that you need for that. And man, no shame on you. I love you. Go do that. Just know the story of the data that says this is what we've done and this actually works. Then keep having a 10, 15% pull through rate. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't know the story and you're not getting a 30, 35% pull through rate on projects, and you think that's where you want to be, which I think that's where you want to be, then you have to go find a different kind of client.
Yeah, and internally for the MSP or any small business, it's how do you allocate the resources for that customer acquisition, right? So maybe it's more
Yeah.
marketing, maybe it's more sales, maybe it's more account management. It's definitely all of those three. It's just kind of like it kind of ebbs and flows based on kind of how you need to grow. So I love the model where the client grows, I grow. So my managed service
Yes.
agreement grows as the client grows. The pull through rate naturally grows with that because one, more users plus as you onboard more systems and the client grows, they're going to just give you projects. You're essentially an order taker, you know. And so versus having to kind of have boots on the ground for sales, you're kind of just internally, maybe you have account management that's really good. You're managing that relationship. So less outbound sales, more kind of inbound kind of order taking and account management relationship, making sure that that ICP is being honored properly
That's right.
through that process. So yeah, it's fun stuff. Like I'm a huge fan of forecasting in general, but when you think about how you forecast that, it definitely does reside on what that ICP looks like and what to expect from them.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, that's it. That makes me think about that account management challenge. It's you kind of start with why do we want what's the role of account management? Well, it's to keep the client and sell the client more stuff, right? Like that's just the most coarse way you could put that. But if you go and look at your existing clients and you say, well, with no intention, we've got this, 15, 17% pull through rate. Well, yeah, take a year or 2 and really concentrate on that account management and see if that made a difference. Did that more intention and attention get you to that 25, 30%? Well, you just learned something about your client base. There was more. We had to go and find it. We couldn't just lay back. But if you also find that, hey, we just did a really good, 18 months of account management, and these clients just aren't that, 15% is just what we're going to get, and you start taking a hard look and as to why that's true, there's your answer. We don't have to invest heavily in account management for this subset of or this current book of clients. We're really focusing on let's not lose the client, which is, a little different mission. As
What do you
you
see?
change, go ahead.
Yeah. Y yeah, what do you see like, I'm thinking about this and it's like, we're talking about this from like a high level mature, MSP that really thinks about this stuff. They do the forecasting. They even know what an ICP is, right? Like, this may not be the normal MSP. Um, what's normal? So my question, right, is I'm seeing stuff where, the MSP wants to offer this all-encompassing managed service. They've already decided the client doesn't want to spend more money for whatever reason. So they include things like they include like, oh, we'll set up new computers for you, and oh, we'll do projects under this agreement. Now I know how I feel, but what are you seeing out there with the MSPs in general? Are they waking up to this managed service, all-inclusive smoke and mirrors game that has been told to them? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first wave that we saw started like 7, 8 years ago, where everyone said the all you can eat is is the wrong model, where it's just like, "We're gonna charge you this big amount, and you're never gonna get another bill from us." Um, People have moved away from that. Now, a bunch of them still have the legacy stuff, and it causes some mayhem on their P&L, but that's not what they're going to market with. What they've done is said, "Okay, well, we're really gonna kind of fine tune our moves, ads, and change, criteria." Okay, that was a great step, but that's where they're stuck right now is proper identification of a move, add, and change, and having the wherewithal to actually build a client for it. Like, so they're in this middle ground where they say, well, all you can eat is bad. I've moved to a here's a bunch of excluded things. I'm still maturing on, having that clarity with the client, having the clarity with dispatch on the ticket hygiene, having the clarity with the text to say, just enter your time. I'll determine if it's billable or not. There's a lot of noise in that final mile. Lot of noise.
So is that where it deteriorates for the pull through, is the fact that we potentially could pull through, but we aren't disciplined enough internally to build properly? Or are we still finding that the agreements aren't clear enough to really bill for this stuff in the right way?
Yeah, it's really the latter. It's we intuitively know there's a problem, but we haven't had the right conversation with the client 'cause that's could be perceived as a really tough conversation. What we'll also not do as an MSP is dig into the data to tell the story of how much money are we walking over. And that's a phrase I learned the other day from this really awesome CFO. He used this phrase called DRIP, data rich, information poor, where you've got all this data, but you haven't converted it to information or actionable information yet. And I think the story of how much money we're walking over or letting slide, it's in the data. But do you have the not only the ability to mine it, do you also have the nerve to go mine it? Because it's not going to likely be a fun story to read.
So, like, I'm thinking if I was an MSP watching this, I was like, okay, I know I have data, right? Like I have my ConnectWise or Autotask or whatever set up. So, and my guys are pretty good at entering time. I've got my invoicing working. So I've got this data rich environment. Um, Josh and Gary just introduced this concept of pull through rate to me that I kind of understood, but didn't really have the right frame of mind to understand what I should be expecting. So if we're saying, what are we saying? Are we saying, if the client bills $2,500 a month in managed services, what's the multiple that we put on that for pull through?
All in with product, hourly, and project, about 100%. I think those folks I referenced earlier, the 75 plus $1 million company, MSP, they're at like a 1.2. Right, they want 120%. Now, product is the variable in there that can really you have to look at each one of those buckets individually. So I'm looking for at least 30% on project. I'm looking for about 20% on hourly, and I'm looking for that remainder in the product or the resold cloud licenses.
We'll be right back with more, but first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Cool.
And to your
So,
point, some of it just
yeah.
happens. Yeah.
So then what we could do is we could take our data, we can kind of put it into Excel or whatever, and then we can kind of set our targets. And then we can kind of see what that delta is. Maybe we have a
That's right.
surplus on some clients, maybe we have a deficit on others. But that would be a good exercise for an MSP to kind of go through to see, hey, what are we achieving, and per client. And then, gosh, now I'm thinking, oh, we got some action items for our account manager to go and look at, sort it. Hey, we've got 0 here, maybe we got 5% here, maybe we got 10%. Let's go find out what's happening with that client. Let's have a talk with them. Hey, we've noticed you're not really growing your business. What's going on? So you could reframe that relationship of like, hey, this is what we're seeing companies like you do. We want to help facilitate that. Where do we fit in your plan? And so you can then re-engage them on a different level to find out, like, is this client real? Like, are they going to grow? If not, they start to fall outside of our ICP. Doesn't mean we fire them, but we know now we have this reservation of clients that really aren't our growth drivers.
That's right. That's exactly right. And what in that first sweep through the data, presuming you're not a Bering McKinley client, then this might be really new to say, let me look at my P&L. Do I even have it broken out in my service revenue of project, hourly, recurring? So that's going to be your first stumbling point, is say, gosh, my project, my hourly is just called pro services. All right, well, we've got to go through the effort to tease that apart. Once you're able to do that and you say, okay, well, what percentage of my service revenue is coming from each one of those buckets? What's the dollar amount over month? Now or you can answer for yourself, have I put intention towards the hourly and the project in the past? The answer is probably no. Now you said, well, just organically, this is what happens. Once I see the delta between what Barry McKinley says I could or should be, how do I solve that delta, to your point, Gary? It's, what do I do now? Right. And when you look at, hey, my hourly is really low and my AGP is really low, now I've got to figure out what did I leave on the table? Where am I going to find that? And the answer, if we're really mature, and most of us aren't this mature, is through my TSIs. Did I set up my types, subtypes, and items correctly so that I could start pulling the tickets that indicate that they probably should have not been included? Otherwise, go create a data lake and start LLMing, interrogate your data in that way. But it's going to be challenging, right? It's going to be challenging.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that MSPs face, especially as they're kind of maturing through this process, is they booked all this business under a managed service agreement. And maybe their agreements are great. Maybe they're getting that 200, 250, maybe even $300 a user. And they got great gross profitability. What happens is you go, okay, well, that's guaranteed, right? So we know that money's coming in. Therefore, I can afford to pay this many technicians at this rate. And they stop there because they're afraid to say, that other 30% or that 100% pass pull through is real.
Yeah.
So then they get stuck in this weird spot where it's like, hey, one is usually that's work is project work, which is like this elevated engineer kind of status, which seemingly is the most difficult job to hire for. Seems like you always overpay and get less than what is desired. But ultimately, what the challenge is for the MSP is like, okay, one, is that real or not? Does that actually exist for those clients? And I think we're here to say it does. And I think we're here to say it's been happening if you just go and look.
Yes,
So that's step one,
yeah.
right? So go and look and see, like, hey, how much did that cost? Oh, that they were $36,000 a year, but gosh, they did $20,000 last year with us in projects. That's interesting. I didn't realize that was happening because it comes in weird bursts, right?
Right.
Project back in March doesn't look like it happened in December. But what really ends up happening is you get this erosion of project time entered because you didn't staff for that. You staffed for the support, and then you're trying to balance these support guys with project work, and the projects get longer and longer, and the scope gets more and more ambiguous because you don't execute on it. And you stop going after the new projects because you have all this backlog work that you didn't hire for.
Yes.
So it's this thing where we teased ourselves into saying, hey, I've got this guaranteed money. All I need to do is fill a seat and do the support and the customer will be happy. But really what they're saying with this project work is I'm trying to grow my business. And I need you to be here to help me grow. Therefore, you need to put someone in that seat to ensure that those projects are getting done.
That's
So
right.
it's really this kind of reflection of like what's happening. Is this real or not? Am I supporting the company properly when it is real? And how do I support that internally with the right resources? How do I budget for that person? What we're saying is take your managed services, double it, and then that's your project work. Now, again, hardware, software sales, so it's not pure profit, but selling it at the right rate, there's a lot of profit in that as well. So that's the challenge for an MSP is to say, hey, this is real work. It will come in because of X, right? Because of growth, natural kind of client movement, etc. I need to staff for that and I need to execute on that work because it's just money that's not being collected.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's I identify. I think that's what I really heard you say is go and look and see what's happening, right? Because something's happening, right? Is it optimal? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But that's that first step is go find out what's been happening, and then put some intention and planning around it. It's not the biggest lift in the world. I've been working off the same ratios forever on the P&L of I want, 40% of your service revenue to be recurring revenue, 30 from project, 30 from hourly, or some mix of that. For the first 10 years of doing this, people would just laugh at my low recurring revenue percentage. And I didn't have probably the best way to explain it because I'm maturing as well. But this story is still true. I want you to have as many recurring dollars as you can handle, but that pull through of hourly and project is the real story in there. So if you find yourself, you look at your P&L and look at the service revenue. If 80% of your service revenue is coming from recurring, well, I assure you, I can almost guarantee you that there is money left on the table on that hourly in the project. I can also pretty much take a pretty good bet that your AGP is not optimal either.
Let's reiterate the issue with that, right? The issue isn't just, hey, you're leaving money on the table. Like that's part of it. And it does
Right.
hurt you as a company, but think about your clients. They're
Oh,
literally saying, I want to
yes.
spend this
Yes.
money with you because I
Yes.
want to grow my business.
Yes.
like
Yeah, no,
if
well
anything,
said.
honor that, right? Because
Yes.
that's the client that's going to come back to you in 6 months when you're not you're not asking them what they need, you're not there at the table when they're when they're making their plans for growth. You're not engaged with them. What do you think is going to happen when an MSP shows up that starts to talk to them that way? There's a
That
deficit happening in this
absolutely.
relationship that you don't realize is so beneficial for you to to execute as if this is true.
That's so true, and I think, without, being too mean about it, for 15 years, MSPs have said, um, we're advisors to our clients. We really get in and we understand their business. To which I kind of say collectively, no, you don't. Now, Bob sitting out there screaming right now, okay, cool. You're the guy. You do it. I believe you. All right. But collectively, no, we're not. So when you think about, what Gary just said of honor what they want to do, they want to grow their business and they want you to help them grow their business and they want to give you this money. You really have to honor that because it is true. The reason it may not feel necessarily accurate to you is you actually have not had the conversation with them that you've aligned to say, we're here to help you grow. We want to grow with you. And I think at this moment in time, up until this moment, it's been optional. Right? MSP is what an MSP is, support the network, make sure they can get access to it, make sure it's secure, critical stuff. But it ain't business advisory. And the appropriateness of asking them what they're trying to do in their business probably felt awkward. Or maybe for some of your clients, it was wonderful. But at this moment in time, you don't have a choice. The puck is heading towards MSP taking a more of a back seat to what else can technology do for them. You are going to move. You're either going to stay on the P&L and live there and just get etched down to a smaller part of your client's P&L, or you're going to run rapidly to the balance sheet. You're really going to run towards that. How do I talk to you about an ROI? And once that starts clicking in your head, having the right conversation with the client will get you those dollars that you have not honored of saying, I'm really here to help you grow the business and do better. And that's the second part of the story here for us, Gary, is I'm becoming more and more convinced. I'm getting more and more conviction behind the idea that MSP is going to be around for a long time. But if an MSP doesn't do both things well and talk about optimizing the business, saving the business, cycles and headcount, you're going to stagnate and eventually be irrelevant. And you're going to watch these startups or whatever you want to call it come in and say, okay, we have there was a big wallet that I didn't even know was there. I've been getting this part of the wallet. Now someone else is getting the rest of the wallet. And that I'll eventually realize I could have had the whole doggone wallet. Do you think that that's accurate? And you
Tell
can
me
disagree
more.
with me.
What do you, so there's a few things floating around in my head. So there's like the MSP kind of IT provider, right? Like the person that does the support for the company. There was a shift in, the early 2010s of like, oh my God, the cloud's coming. We're all screwed, right? Microsoft's going to
Right.
take all our business. What we found
Right.
was like, oh, no, we just have servers in a different place. Like
Right.
we're actually charging a different way. We charge per user versus per device. This really didn't make a difference. In fact, it probably gave a lot of relief to a lot of MSPs that didn't have to deal with infrastructure in the same way. Now what we're talking about is, and I think there's two things going on. There's AI, and there's also this kind of shared information out there with the internet, social media, YouTube, all these different platforms, peer groups, etc. Right? Like, I mean, I could be like living in an echo chamber, but I don't think so. I think many companies are waking up and finding like, hey, there's other people talking about how to run a business, and I can learn. Um, and what happens is, as the MSP, I think what you're saying is you're diminishing your position as a support for a company when you don't kind of up your game in these kind of arenas, right? Like we learned the cloud, we kind of had to. A lot of people didn't want to, but ultimately, like kind of everyone's on the cloud, and we kind of just figured it out, and that was okay. With AI, um, this first iteration of quote unquote AI, LLMs, chat bots, kind of like, this is going to be something that doesn't really kind of inject itself into most small businesses, and most MSPs will kind of just say, it's not real. But what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a subset of MSPs that go, no, this is real, and this is how it should look. It's not just like a chat interface that a company's, looking at their data, like that's cool, right? Like, but again, what do you do with it? What they're going to say is like, hey, with vibe coding and AI, I could build systems and integrate into the client systems in a much faster, easier way, maybe even in-house a lot of this stuff. And now I could provide a different product to these clients.
That's right. That's right.
And those MSPs now have this upper hand on all other MSPs because they can actually do things that's more applicable for the client versus just picking up the phone and calling you when their printer doesn't work.
That's exactly right. And what that looks like, let's see, this is 2026, 2015. Probably 2015 was the first time I heard the phrase MSSP, right? So what happened? Most MSPs started upping their knowledge and their game around security. Now, they could say they were geniuses for doing it, or they could say we had to do it and we had it, and it hasn't done much for us. We are still scared to ask them for another $2,000 a month, and we just do the minimum that we think the client will pay for. But a bunch of people spun up MSSPs and killed it. Like they came into your clients and they said, we're the MSSP, or they went out and got clients that were with someone else and they just upped the stack. We know two companies that are well over 75 million that did not exist in 2014, that they just solved that MSSP. I think the same thing is going to happen here. You've got your MSP, you can anchor in and do a great job. And maybe this whole AI stuff is real or not real. but you're going to see a different category of business start popping up, and they're going to be 50 million in 10 years.
Yeah, this
And
technology stack that it was bifurcated. It was like, software development companies and then IT support companies. It's like, it's just, there's just been a clear line and for many reasons, the engineers on the IT support just don't understand, programming language, and the programmers on the software development didn't understand networking. And so it's like this easy way of saying, hey, that's our development team and that's our support team. What we're finding with AI, with the AI that's being developed, is like, it's giving the ability for the technology provider to be both. And I think the upper hand is actually with the MSP. So I think, having the ability to support, you have a larger customer base. They're used to talking to you every day. And then for you to introduce some of this stuff makes way more sense. And again, if you're the one saying, hey, that's not real, and I get it, man, like it's just like the cloud wasn't real and then it just kind of got folded in. But the opportunity that you're talking about, if you can execute on that, say, okay, well, we've got this client base and, they kind of always ask for this kind of application to live on top of the rest of their systems to give them better data, whatever. You could productize that and, get to market fairly quickly with, pretty advanced technology that wasn't available even 6 months ago.
that's right.
So there's a massive opportunity there for the MSP to kind of expand their their offering. The other side of it that I wanted to talk about was kind of that information sharing. Like companies like ours, where we're standing up platforms and talking to customers about how to run their business. I mean, this is happening across the internet. Peer groups are becoming stronger over the years, and the companies that get involved at this level will start to realize that, like, not only should they be involved with kind of sharing information and collaborating with other people in their industry or even outside of their industry, but their clients are also doing this, right? So, as their client gets more mature, they're going to start to have more thoughtful meetings about growth and leadership and how technology fits in. And it's just more technology, especially with this AI kind of wave. You want to be at that table. Like, you wanna be there. Like, no MSP loves it when the client calls them, after 6 months of meeting on all this stuff and goes, "Hey, we need, 50 computers." And you're like, "Wait, what? What's happening? Like, which ones? Where is it going?" All this stuff. Like, you don't yeah, the order feels good, maybe, but, like, the whole strategy around it, like, how do they know it's even the right move? And now you're just being dictated what you should be doing. That's not a great spot for you to be in. And if you're not at that table, someone probably is at that table that has the company that usually is sitting alongside them at that table.
That's
You
right.
know, the technology partner should be there. And if you have like a management consultant that comes in, generally speaking, they're going to have a strong technology team behind them that they
That's
want.
right.
So this is an opportunity for all MSPs out there to really think about how they position themselves inside these clients, because these clients are becoming fully aware that there's ways to grow their business, and they're going to start taking action if they haven't already, um, through these two catalysts. Yeah.
That's so exactly right. My mom can talk to me about what she does with Chat GPT. Ben's mom has a GPT that she runs everything by. She's 70 something years old. Like, the mystery around it is being reduced. When you think about your, 10-person client, accounting firm as an example, the most interesting thing they could talk about over the last 5 years is whether they should expand to SharePoint, right? Oh, should we make a site? Should we do that? There was nothing for your client to really talk about or imagine in IT. Maybe they heard somebody use the word API and this system could talk to that system. That's interesting. But now they're getting bombarded, whether they're in their own peer groups, learning and talking to that little younger business owner who's saying, I did this. And now they think maybe I want to do that. they're gonna be presented with this. They have something fun to talk about. They have something fun to imagine. Go capitalize on the conversation. And what's going to happen? Where I've gotten a lot of grief on my, 40, 30, 30 on the project hourly and recurring, the that could very well be your reality, whether are intentional about it or not. There is so much project work that can start coming from this that you might find yourself leading with. I'm going to come in, I'm going to do this business technology type of project. I'm going to be over my skis. I'm not going to be really prepared to figure out, who I'm going to use for the vibe coding and who's going to make this agent or whatever it is. But you're really served well to get into the fight, and getting into the fight with anybody who wants to do it, whether they're a managed service client or not. The MSP work can follow. That technology company that's going to be having the conversation around AI and automation, likely they will have the chops to do what you're doing in the managed services. Likely they're born out of some other managed services initially in the small business space. You get to decide if you're going to be able to do what they do. They're likely going to be able to do what you do to some good enough degree, but will you be able to do what they do and keep that business out of your client? That I think is the challenge.
Yeah, and where I'm looking at it is like, because this is always the thing is like, could you be a cloud specialist in the early 2010s? Like, I saw a lot of companies come in like, we're the Google Cloud specialists. I'm like, dude, get out of here. Like, what does that even mean?
Right.
Right. So I think it's the same thing with like an, quote unquote AI specialist. It's like, yeah, if you're not an MSP and you're claiming I'm an AI specialist, are you going to be able to take care of their IT? I don't think so. So I think it's going to kind of look similar. But what I'm calling out is there's going to be a subset of MSPs that go, oh, no, we want to do the AI piece.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
the other thing that we really need to be aware of is like, up until like maybe 3 or 4 months ago, the word AI was kind of followed this kind of track of like, oh, it's going to replace everyone's job. And like, to me, I was just like, oh, come on. Like, sure, that makes sense over time in a way. And most technology does replace most jobs over time, right? But as of recent, there's some major layoffs happening globally with just the idea of AI being in the mix. Now, there's a lot of talk that says, well, they're just using the word AI to allow them to reduce their workforce, because they're bloated and that kind of thing. But which is also true. But you would have to be crazy to think that like as this stuff matures, it wouldn't reduce headcount in your clients. When you're faced with, hey, I've got this, billing department that, I used to work for a fairly large, 100 plus employee law firm that just had massive amount of billing. They had like 8 billing people, it was crazy.
Man.
And, they use QuickBooks to bill and, some other time kind of sheet thing. And, you know, when I'm looking at that today and just with Claude and, some kind of, building some app to kind of handle that data, like that gets compressed easily down to one person. So for an MSP that bills per user now because the cloud and, devices went away and, we just support, help desk, boy, when we just talked about earlier about, hey, as they grow, we grow. Well, as they decline, we decline. So I'm not like here to doom and gloom and everyone's going to go away. No one's going to have a job. I think it's just there's going to be different companies with different jobs. Like there's going to be new companies that start up with new jobs for those people that didn't fit the old company. So I'm more of a belief of that. I don't think anyone's just going home and sitting on the couch in mass. But as an MSP, when I'm thinking about like, if there's a risk out there, and let's just give it like a 10% risk rating of like, 50 of my clients like reducing their headcount because, now they can do this automation, and maybe they reduce by 20%. We're talking about some material numbers kind of falling off, and usually that would be a bad thing. But if you could step in and be the reason that that happens and capitalize on the fact that like, hey, I'm actually making the company better. We're increasing profitability for them. We're giving them better systems. We're developing this software or working with someone that helps develop this software that automates and uses AI to do these processes. That's where I'd want to be. That's, so I can capture back that loss of revenue, make my clients better. Hopefully they grow. And then maybe we develop a different way of, billing the customers in the future, just like we did when the cloud came out.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, there'll be RMMs for bots and agentic AIs, and that stuff's probably going to need a lot of care and feeding. So there are going to be lots of opportunities for you in there. And there is the challenge ahead of you is to say, what does my typical client look like today? What would my ideal client look like today? And what will my ideal client look like 2, 3, 5 years from now? When I think of my pull through rate, well, this is what's happened thus far. What might that pull through rate look like differently in the future? Maybe pull through rate gets defined as how much managed services do we come along with from our projects that we're doing for these clients. We've got to just kind of raise that awareness, tie the story together to say what do- what do I need from spend from any given client that's ideal for us, and how do I behave once they are a client to ensure that I get it, and test that ICP thesis that you put together. So that's the good conversation, Gary. It was really fun to have the conversation recently with the client that kind of brought this to my most recent awareness. So lot in here. Gary, you got some final words for us on this?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to challenge each, if you're running an MSP or part of the MSP executive team, and you haven't really considered what your ICP is, like just take a weekend to kind of look at that. Look at your existing customer base. Hey, who do we support? Who do we love to support? Who actually grows at this 20% a year? Do we have the pull through rate? Just start shaping your mind around like what's actually happening in the business, and then just try to be intentional about how to make this make sense. Like I think a lot of people miss the fact that like just with pure intention you end up getting what you want.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. And again, referring to this recent client engagement, um, we kind of discovered this thread of conversation in their vision operating system. We were kind of going through for our monthly check, and we said, okay, well, here up here at the beginning of the meeting, we're checking out. Hey, you've been working on your ICP, you've been working on your purpose statement, you've been working on how you're going to integrate your initiatives and get your meeting cadence, checking in on all of that. Well, by the time we got down and said, oh, you guys are supposed to add several $100,000 of recurring revenue this year, that just having that on the plan and having those two things, it probably seemed somewhat unrelated when we made the plan back in the late fall. It's like, hey, thank goodness those were on the same kind of trail of thought. Because if we were trying to address one without the other and why we aren't making our revenue growth, man, it was so nice to have that ICP circle back to say, well, that's why we're not getting what we need right there. We've identified our ICP. We're still developing, but is that really translating to how we're selling as well? And is that beginning to explain why we're not hitting what we're hitting? So definitely, as Gary says, take some time, think about your ICP, do that, but also go back and think about your strategic plan and say, where does this net new task that Gary just gave me fit in my plan? Or does it just go on a one note page of like, I got to do this now as well? Tie all those tasks together with your strategic plan. So, Gary, good chat. Love it. Everyone else, thanks for joining us. Leave us some comments down below. Check out another video. Give us a holler if you need anything. Thanks, gang. Bye.